Thalassa V was a beautiful world, quiet and peaceful. Its surface covered mostly in deep blue oceans, glowing with bioluminescent coral and floating crystal reefs. The Thalassari were gentle beings, tall, elegant creatures with skin like flowing, water and voices that echoed like waves. They lived in harmony with the sea and never built machines of war. Their only power was healing, and their songs could mend wounds and calm even the most unstable minds. For over a decade, a small human science team lived among them, sent not as soldiers, but as observers from Earth's interstellar diplomacy corps. The outpost was small, just 2 domes, one underwater and one on a small floating platform, but the bonds they had formed with the Thalassari were strong. Commander Ellen Drake had led the mission since the start. She was not a soldier, not anymore. Her background was in xenobiology, her file full of research awards, not medals. But over the years, she had grown protective, not just of the Thalassari's culture, but of the people themselves. She'd seen how they treated her team like family, offering shelter during storms, weaving silk-threaded sea wraps for injured staff, and teaching them the ways of the ocean. When the Auric Dominion arrived, that peace shattered like glass beneath a hammer. Their ships blotted out the sundark, jagged vessels shaped like daggers falling from the sky. Without any warning or attempt at negotiation, they dropped anchor in orbit and sent down mining rigs into the oceans. They claimed the Thalassari waters contained rare plasma-reactive minerals needed for their war fleets. And under a newly passed Council Trade Authority law, they declared the entire planet a Dominion resource site. The humans protested. They sent messages up the chain, cited treaties, quoted interstellar law. The Auric officers didn't even respond. They simply ignored the humans, as if they were an inconvenience, and continued to deploy extraction towers into the reefs, scarring the ocean floor and poisoning marine life. Ellen stood on the edge of the observation platform one morning, watching as one of the Thalassari swimming clusters returned to shore, dragging behind them the dead body of a youngling, its body blackened by industrial waste. The look on the elder Thalassar's face, one of quiet, stunned heartbreak, stayed with her all day. That night, as her team sat in silence, Ellen walked into the command dome and opened a secure channel to Earth. Her voice was calm, but her words were heavy. "Command, this is Thalassa V Outpost Delta. We have a situation. Dominion forces have begun aggressive occupation. Our diplomatic channels have been dismissed. The Thalassari are being harmed. If they keep pushing, they'll find out what humanity really is." Then she closed the message, encrypted it, and sent it through the deep space relay. No one in her team asked her what she had said. They could all feel it too. Something was wrong. The Auric didn't see the Thalassari as people. They didn't see the humans as a threat. But Ellen knew something they didn't. When humanity chooses to protect someone, they don't do it halfway. Over the next few days, the Dominion operations intensified. Their security troops, armed with stun lances and energy rifles, began patrolling the beaches and drop zones, barking orders in a language neither humans nor Thalassari understood. They pushed into sacred water temples, drained thermal sanctuaries, and set up barricades near healing gardens where wounded Thalassari once went to recover. The human team wasn't equipped for combat, but they had eyes, ears, and minds. They began documenting everything, recording troop movements, extracting water samples to prove contamination, and quietly warning Thalassari elders where to hide when drills began. Still, none of them said what they all feared, that it might already be too late. But then something changed. One evening, Ellen received a short, coded ping, just a burst of data from Earth Command. It had no words, just a color and a file tag. The color was red. The tag read, "Priority acknowledged. Response en route. Hold position." It wasn't an order to evacuate. It wasn't a message of sympathy. It was a warning. Earth had heard. Earth was coming. Ellen didn't tell the team right away. She wanted them to stay focused, to keep doing what they could for their alien friends. But in her heart, something had shifted. The humans of Thalassa V were no longer alone. And if they... Oric thought they could crush an ocean world while Earth stood by. They were about to make the worst mistake of their empire's life. For now, Ellen watched, waited, and prepared. The Thalassari had never needed armies. They never believed in war. But now, because of the Oric, they had defenders. And not just any defenders humans, the species who made war not for conquest, but for love, loyalty, and vengeance. Quietly, Thalassa V braced for what was coming. And somewhere deep beneath the waves, where Thalassari healers once sang peace into the water, silence began to turn into something else resolve. The sun rose over Thalassa V with an eerie calm, its golden light rippling across the ocean surface like fire on glass. The Thalassari were quiet that morning, their songs silent, their movements slow. Even the fish beneath the coral stayed still, sensing what was to come. The Oric Dominion had increased its presence overnight. 3 more ships in low orbit, 2 more ocean drills deployed into the sacred southern reefs, and security patrols now marching openly along the shorelines. Their machines roared across the once silent waters, tearing up seabeds and leaving oily wakes behind. The humans at the outpost could do little but watch and document. They were scientists, not soldiers. But something in their eyes had changed, like a fuse quietly burning. Its way to the powder. Ellen Drake stood on the edge of the platform, hands gripping the rail, her gaze locked on the black structure rising just beyond the reef, a Dominion command tower, forced into the earth like a spear. The Thalassari had begged the Oric to stop. Their leaders had approached the landing zone, unarmed and peaceful, carrying woven peace shells, a sacred symbol in their culture. The Oric commander, a towering brute named Surek, had taken the offering and crushed it in his hand. No translator was needed to understand the insult. The message was clear: your peace means nothing to us. That night, the humans held a silent meeting in the operations dome. The 7-person team sat in the glow of the central holotable, faces lit by tactical maps and Dominion fleet logs. They all knew Earth's response fleet was on the way, but they also knew the Oric wouldn't. Wait. Ellen spoke quietly, her voice level. We're not soldiers, but we're not bystanders either. She laid out the plan, not to fight the Oric head-on, but to slow them down, protect the Thalassari, and expose the Dominion's crimes to the wider galaxy. The team agreed without hesitation. They had seen enough. The next day, the Oric made their move. A detachment of Dominion troops arrived by hovercraft at one of the Thalassari sea sanctuaries. The site was ancient, a place of healing where the oceans met the cliffs in a shimmering arc. It had never known violence. The Oric didn't care. They claimed it for resource analysis, drove the Thalassari out at gunpoint, and dropped seismic anchors into the water. But they didn't know a human drone had been watching from the cliffs. Dr. Leon, the team's tech specialist, uploaded the footage to 3 interstellar relay points, tagging it with timestamps and council law violations. The footage began to spread before the Oric could react. But even that wasn't the worst part. That evening, one of the humans' closest Thalassari allies, a young healer named Sorrel, was caught near a mining rig trying to retrieve a basket of coral eggs, an act of quiet defiance. The Oric troops grabbed him. What happened next was brutal. They didn't kill him, but they left him broken and bleeding near the outpost shoreline. When the humans found him, he was barely breathing. Ellen knelt beside him, whispering soft words. His gills fluttered. His eyes opened, and he reached up, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder before slipping into unconsciousness. That was the moment everything changed. Ellen stood, her face unreadable. She walked into the command dome, opened the secure channel to the Dominion surface base, and sent a single message. This is Commander Ellen Drake of the Terran Outpost. You have assaulted the people of this planet and harmed our allies. You have one chance to withdraw. One. She waited for a reply. None came. The Orc didn't take the warning seriously. They should have. That night, the humans made their first strike. Using tools built for underwater exploration, they disabled one of the Orcs' main mining platforms. A reprogrammed repair drone slipped beneath the waterline and overloaded the tower's cooling systems. When it exploded, it sent a column of fire and steam into the sky. The Dominion called it an accident. But then the communications relay went down. Then a patrol boat vanished. Then a resource dropship crashed into the sea after its navigation. System failed sabotaged by a virus hidden inside an innocuous research probe. The Orcs still didn't understand. They thought they were being attacked by rebels. They didn't realize the humans were behind it. Not yet, but Ellen and her team weren't hiding. They knew retaliation would come. They prepared to defend. The outpost, reinforcing the walls, placing decoy heat signatures on nearby islands, and rigging the underdocks with shock charges. They weren't planning to win a war. They were planning to hold the line until Earth arrived. 3 days later, the Dominion responded. A full transport cruiser descended from orbit and deployed a siege squad around the outpost. They moved with confidence, their armor gleaming, weapons hot. Ellen stepped out to meet them, not with weapons, but with a data crystal in her hand. She held it up. This contains footage of every violation you've committed here. Assault on civilians, destruction of cultural sites, unauthorized occupation. It's already been sent to multiple council networks. You still have a chance to walk away. The Orc commander laughed. Then he raised his weapon. What happened next was chaos. One of the humans triggered the dock charges, sending up a massive plume of seawater that knocked the Orc squad off balance. The outpost's defense field activated, shielding the dome. From the cliffs, 2 humans with modified plasma cutters began targeting Dominion equipment. Thalassari civilians, guided by the humans, escaped into deep underwater tunnels. And in orbit, just beyond sensor range, a flicker of light marked the arrival of something new, something the Orc had not expected. The first Terran response vessel, Valkyrie 1, slid into position behind a moon's shadow, awaiting the fleet. The humans on Thalassa V had done what they needed to do. They had drawn the line. They had stood by their friends. And now, the rest of humanity was coming. The first fire had fallen, and it had awakened something dangerous, not just in Earth's military, but in its heart. Because when humanity defends, it doesn't do it halfway. It does it without mercy. The stars above Thalassa V shifted as the sky opened with a ripple of blue-white light, and from that fracture in space came something the Orc Dominion had not expected. The humans had arrived, and they had not come quietly. First came Valkyrie 1, its armored hull gleaming like obsidian streaked with fire, followed by Hammerfall, Saber's Edge, and 12 more warships, each bearing the crest of Earth's Terran Defense Coalition. These were not the clunky civilian ships the Orc had dismissed before. These were purpose-built defenders, forged in orbital shipyards, sharpened by centuries of war, and powered not just by fuel and technology, but by fury. The humans had watched long enough. Now they were here to act. In orbit, Dominion Command scrambled, their fleet barely able to process the scale of the Terran response. Their scanners picked up assault frigates, stealth corvettes, drone carriers, and a single dreadnought TDS Unbroken, a war relic brought out of retirement not for battle, but for justice. On the planet's surface, Ellen Drake stood on the command. Dome's platform, eyes fixed on the sky, listening to the coded signal playing through her earpiece. Thalassa Outpost, this is Admiral Royce of the 7th Response Fleet. We have eyes on you. Prepare for rapid containment. Her chest tightened, but not in fear. It was something else relief. For days, they had held the line alone. Now the line was backed by Earth itself. The Auric Dominion made their first mistake by thinking they still held the upper hand. Their cruiser fleet moved to intercept the human formation, broadcasting a standard challenge code in a dozen languages. But humans didn't answer with words. Saber's Edge opened the first volley, launching gravitic torpedoes that tore straight through the Auric flanking squad. Shields buckled. Engines exploded. One of the Dominion ships tilted, breaking orbit and spiraling into the upper atmosphere, trailing flame. The response was immediate. The rest of the Auric fleet opened fire, but the humans had brought more than firepower. They had brought strategy. The Terran ships didn't charge blindly. They weaved through enemy lines, using gravity warps and silent boosters to flank and scatter the Dominion ships. Automated drone wings deployed in waves, darting like silver fish, targeting weak points with precision-coded strikes. Within their first 10 minutes, 3 Dominion cruisers were disabled, 2 destroyed, and another fled into deep space, engines leaking plasma. And that was only the beginning. On the surface, drop pods rained from the sky like falling stars. Terran Marines landed in coordinated waves, armor shimmering with kinetic shielding, their boots slamming into the coral sands with practiced rhythm. They weren't here to conquer, they were here to protect. Every squad had detailed maps of Vavin, Thalassari settlements, safe zones, and cultural sites. Orders were clear. No harm to the natives. Protect civilians at all costs. Secure territory. Show them who we are. The Thalassari watched in silence as the humans spread across the shoreline, not to take, but to shield. Marines set up perimeter defenses, constructed mobile aid clinics, and even distributed fresh water filters and wound patches. For the first time in days, the Thalassari felt hope. Meanwhile, Ellen was escorted aboard Valkyrie 1, where Admiral Royce stood tall and composed, his uniform crisp, his voice calm, but steel-hard. "We've reviewed your reports," he told her, his eyes scanning her face. The Dominion crossed too many lines. It didn't just attack a peaceful people. They ignored a Terran warning. And that means one thing. He turned toward the holoscreen, which displayed Dominion command nodes across the Las's orbit and surface. They learn what happens next. With precision and discipline, the humans launched a series of surgical strikes. They didn't fire blindly. They hit command centers, communication towers, refineries, and staging zones. Drones slipped through ventilation shafts. EMP mines shut down energy grids. Even Dominion AI cores were paralyzed by Terran virus code, written by a linguistics expert who once studied Thalassari songs. Every strike told a story. You were warned. You didn't listen. Dominion forces tried to retaliate, sending their shock troops to reclaim the southern reef where they'd first begun their invasion. But this time, they didn't find helpless aliens. They found Marines from Earth's Luna Division, armed with ripple blasters and armored like mobile bunkers. The battle lasted only 14 minutes. The last surviving Auric unit surrendered without even returning fire. Back in orbit, the Dominion fleet limped toward retreat. What had started as a show of dominance had turned into humiliation. The humans had come fast, hard, and without hesitation. They hadn't asked for territory. They hadn't raised a single flag. They had one goal: defend the Thalassari and send a message to every star system watching. And the galaxy was watching. Dozens of neutral worlds had intercepted the battle feeds. Peaceful planets, fringe colonies, and minor species all saw the same thing. Earth rising not as conqueror, but as guardian. a protector that asked for nothing in return but respect, that gave protection with terrifying power when that respect was broken. The Auric Dominion, once so feared, now looked fractured and weak. Their calls for support from the Council went unanswered. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of this fight. On the ocean below, the humans worked side by side with the Thalassari. To clean up the damage, engineers deactivated drill sites. Medics treated the wounded. Scientists retrieved corrupted coral samples, trying to heal what had been poisoned. Ellen returned to the outpost, not as a lone outpost commander, but as a symbol of Earth's promise, that when their friends are in danger, humans do not stay silent. That night, the waves were still again, but the silence was different. It was not the silence of fear, it was the silence of safety. The Thalassari gathered in their great sea ring and sang for the first time in weeks. Their voices rose into the sky, filled with gratitude and strength. Humans stood nearby, not interrupting, just listening, as the water itself seemed to hum with harmony. Ellen stood among them, arms crossed, eyes closed, letting the music wash over her. Admiral Royce, now back aboard the dreadnought, made his final transmission for the day. To all remaining Dominion forces near Thalassa V, disengage and withdraw immediately. This is not a war. This is a warning made real. Earth stands by its allies. We do not back down. You have one last chance to leave, before mercy runs out. The Auric Dominion's pride had been shattered, but its arrogance still clung to the edges of their failing strategy, like rust on iron. In the shadow of their broken fleets, the remnants of their command council gathered on a heavily guarded war, station orbiting a distant moon. They had lost more than ships. They had lost control, reputation, and the fear that once kept other empires quiet. But instead of retreating, the Auric made a decision born of desperation. They would strike again, not to win, but to prove they could still hurt. If they could bring Earth to the negotiating table by threatening Thalassa's lifeblood one more time, they believed they might claw back a piece of their dignity. They didn't understand yet that they were no longer negotiating with diplomats. They were challenging a force that did not forgive. The humans had changed. The moment Sorrel had been left bleeding in the sand, the moment the first Thalassari child had died in poisoned waters, a silent oath had been made across 1,000 human hearts. You do not harm our friends. And if you do, we will stop you completely. Ellen Drake stood once more on the observation deck of Outpost Delta, the sky above clear and calm after days of fire. The Terran fleet still hung in orbit, a silent wall of steel and vengeance. Below, the Thalassari were rebuilding, cautiously, surfacing to gather sunlight and restore sacred gardens. The humans worked beside them without orders, repairing docks, restoring filtration systems, even teaching basic defense procedures. Ellen's heart felt heavy yet steady. There was peace. Again, for now. But it didn't last. Within hours, reports came in. Dominion raider ships had slipped through deep space blind spots, striking at Thalassari outlying settlements on the far side of the planet. Small attacks, surgical, cruel, meant to punish. In one reef village, 22 Thalassari had been captured and held aboard a mobile Dominion fortress barge. They weren't attacking for victory. They were trying to wound the soul of the people. The moment the message reached Admiral Royce, his tone turned colder than space itself. Enough, he said. No more warnings. The Terran 7th Fleet shifted like a living beast, its engines blazing. 3 wings were dispatched in silence. No speeches, no threats. The humans simply moved out at the same time. Something darker was unfolding across the stars. On the Auric capital world, high above their palace towers of dark stone and blue fire, a data transmission spread like wildfire footage from Thalassa, leaked by neutral traders and signal watchers. It showed Dominion troops shoving civilians. It showed the healing pools burning. It showed human marines stepping between aliens and death. And it showed Earth's fury, not in words, but in action. Across dozens of systems, smaller races who once feared the Orc now watched silently and made their choices. In the great trade corridors, 3 merchant fleets refused to renew their contracts with the Dominion. On the edge of Council space, an independent moon state openly offered Earth docking rights, breaking its long-standing neutrality. The Oryx throne wasn't just cracking, it was beginning to fall apart. Still, the Dominion didn't yield. Their High Chancellor ordered the use of banned orbital disruptors over Thalas's western oceans, believing a final blow would shock Earth into retreat. The device, if fired, would collapse an entire reef network home to thousands of Thalasari. The launch code was prepared, the target locked, but Earth had already moved. A human stealth frigate, Whisperblade, had tracked the disruptor signal from the moment it activated. Without orders, its captain made a decision. The frigate dropped from silent warp just above the weapon platform and fired a single pulse lance. The Auric disruptor exploded before it ever left the launcher, vaporizing the platform and everyone on it. The Terran command didn't reprimand the frigate. Instead, Admiral Royce sent a message to the Auric High Council. This was your final act. There will be no more. Surrender your military infrastructure, return every captured Thalasari unharmed, and stand down or your throne will fall. Entirely, the Dominion still hesitated. So Earth took one final step. TDS Unbroken, the largest Terran dreadnought in operation, was given full battle command. It moved into deep Auric territory, accompanied by 2 strike wings and the diplomatic flagship Peacekeeper's Honor. Their mission was not to destroy cities, but to take apart the Dominion's war machine, piece by piece. Within 48 hours, the Auric orbital shipyards were offline, their intelligence cores erased, and 3 of their weapon factories reduced to molten ruins. Human ground units were never deployed because none were needed. The Auric couldn't keep up. Their empire had been built on fear, not loyalty. Now, as fear faded, their systems fractured back on Thalassa V. The last of the captured Thalasari were returned under full protection of Terran escort ships. When they arrived, not a single human smiled. This was not a victory to be celebrated. It was a wound that had barely been closed. The Thalasari elders held a quiet gathering near the central reef, where humans were invited not as guests, but as kin. There, beneath the twilight waters, with fish gliding past glowing stones, the humans watched as the Thalasari wove a new pattern into the sacred sea tapestry, a glowing line of silver and red threads. One of the elders spoke in clear, echoing tones. This thread represents those who came not to rule, but to shield. You are now part of our ocean. Ellen, standing beside Sorrel now healed, and walking again, felt something stir deep within her chest. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. This was about the line humanity draws when it chooses to care, and the strength they wield when that care is betrayed. When the Oriki High Chancellor finally sent a message to Earth, it was not filled with rage or defiance. It was quiet, desperate. We request ceasefire. We accept all terms. The broken throne had fallen not in fire and conquest, but in silence and consequence. And the galaxy, once again, looked toward Earth. And remembered the waters of Thalassa V shimmered like liquid crystal beneath the first true dawn of peace. For the first time in many days, the sky held no warships, no burning trails of orbital reentry, and no storm clouds of smoke. The great reef fields echoed once again with the songs of the Thalasari, soft and slow, flowing through the sea like memory itself. On the surface, the human outpost remained standing, but it looked different, now not a place of isolation, but of connection. Flags from Earth and the Thalassari Council fluttered side by side on the main observation platform, and engineers from both species worked together, restoring what had been broken. Ellen Drake stood beside Sorrel, watching as a new marine hospital took shape on the water's edge, built from both earth alloys and coral stone gifted by the Thalassari. This was no longer just a science station. It had become a symbol, a monument to what could happen when two species stood together. The Terran fleet had begun to withdraw slowly, leaving only a handful of guardian vessels in orbit as a symbol of lasting commitment. Admiral Royce, though needed elsewhere, had remained long enough to finalize the new accord, a permanent peace treaty and defense pact between Earth and Thalassa, now recognized by the Interstellar Council. No more backwater assignments. No more dismissals. The humans had earned their place at the table, and their allies would never be seen as weak again. The signing ceremony was unlike anything ever seen. It took place underwater, in the Heart Dome, a living structure crafted by Thalassari singers from pure crystal coral. Human envoys donned pressure suits enhanced for translation and movement, while the Thalassari formed a circle around the center stage, their voices weaving a protective melody. Ellen, chosen to represent Earth at the moment of signing, approached the central stone tablet with care. Her name was etched beside that of elderly Wren, the eldest voice of Thalassa's ocean kin. No speeches were given. No weapons were displayed. Instead, both leaders placed their hands, one human, one Thalassari, on the tablet together. Light flowed from their touch, sealing the pact with a bioresonant pulse. Across the dome, watchers both human and Thalassari stood in silence, feeling something more powerful than any weapon: unity. Outside the dome, the sea shimmered with the arrival of curious life glowfish, spiraling eels, and rainbow-backed turtles, drawn by the song of peace. Even nature, it seemed, had come to witness history. But even in peace, memories of war lingered. The damage done by the Orc would take years to heal. Many reefs were still poisoned, and Thalassari families had lost loved ones whose spirits were now honored with lanterns drifting across the water each evening. The humans helped recover what they could. Teams of Terran divers volunteered to work alongside local healers, learning the ways of choral singing and water-based restoration. They didn't come to lead, they came to help. And the Thalassari, once reserved and distant with outsiders, now welcomed them like siblings. Children of both species played together in the shallows, learning to speak each other's languages. Stories were exchanged of Earth's long history, of the ocean's memory, of stars and tides, and kindness shown when it mattered most. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the aftermath of the conflict sent shockwaves far and wide. The Auric dominions. Surrender had not just weakened them, it had stripped away the fear that held their empire together. Former client worlds began to declare independence. Trade alliances collapsed. The Interstellar Council opened investigations into years of unchecked aggression. And at the center of it all stood Earth, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Their reputation changed overnight. No longer seen as the young race of scattered colonies, humanity was now respected as a people of fierce loyalty, dangerous restraint, and deep emotional strength. Their power wasn't just in weapons, but in the fact that they chose to fight not for land or resources, but for friendship. That, more than anything, shook the foundations of old empires. On Thalassa V, life moved forward. A joint science academy was built above the northern reef, its classrooms underwater, and its corridors shaped to accommodate both gills and lungs. Ellen stayed on as liaison director, though she often said her heart belonged to the water more than to any title. Sorrel began teaching young Thalassari about human culture, and humans taught Terran children how to read the language of currents. Every year on the day of the first firefall, the day Earth arrived, both species gathered for a shared remembrance. No parades, no weapons, just music, silence, and the lighting of sea lanterns in honor of those lost and those who stood. One lantern always bore no name, meant to honor the promise made silently by every human who stood for peace. We will protect you if no one else will. Ellen often returned to the cliff where she had once watched the Dominion ships arrive. Now it was quiet. A stone bench had been placed there, carved with symbols of both Earth and Thalassa. She would sit there in the evenings, watching the stars rise, knowing that among them were thousands of other worlds now looking toward Earth. Differently, some with caution, others with hope, and still others with quiet admiration. It wasn't power that earned it. It was sacrifice. It was standing when no one else would. That was the legacy the humans had written here, not with guns or invasions, but with loyalty and courage. As night fell and the waves below reflected the stars, Ellen smiled faintly. A galaxy had been warned once. Then it had seen what humanity did when pushed, and now it remembered. Not with fear, but with respect.